So it's going live now, and I will do a brief hello, everyone, and welcome back. We are excited to bring you the Honorable Ambassador Andrew Young. Dr. Tungara will proceed with the introduction of our keynote address today here at the 2020
Welcome back.
Diversity and International Affairs virtual conference and career fair hosted by the Black Professionals in International Affairs. So without further ado, Dr. Tungara, I will defer to you to begin the introduction and this conversation and any comments that you may have for panelists or exhibitors at this time. Thank you.
Good evening again. And for those of you just joining us, let me remind you that you can go to the schedule on the main page of the conference and scroll down and see which sessions are actually taking place at this time. There are a number of sessions, and we hope that you will enjoy those and buzz in and listen to these remarks as well. Now, I would like to introduce you, if you haven't met him already, somewhere along the way, to the Honorable Ambassador Andrew J. Young. He has worldwide recognition as a pioneer in and champion of civil rights and human rights. Ambassador Young's lifelong dedication to service is illustrated by his extensive leadership experience over 65 years, serving as a member of Congress, as a U.S. ambassador to the United Nations, as mayor of Atlanta, and an ordained minister, among other positions. During the 1960s, Ambassador Young was a key strategist and negotiator during the civil rights campaigns that led to the passage of the Civil Rights Act of 1964 and the Voting Rights Act of 1965. Appointed as ambassador to the United Nations in 1977, Ambassador Young negotiated an end to the white minority rule in Namibia and Zimbabwe, and brought President Carter's emphasis on human rights to international diplomacy. As a two-term mayor of Atlanta, Ambassador Young brought in over 1,100 businesses and $70 billion in foreign direct investments. Foreign direct investments into Atlanta, and generated over 1 million jobs. So Ambassador Young has received honorary degrees from more than 100 universities and colleges in the U.S., and his portrait is at the Smithsonian National Portrait Gallery. So Andrew Young serves on a number of boards, just to mention one, Morehouse College, Andrew Young School of Policy Studies at Georgia State, okay, and he is very active, along with his wife, Carolyn McLean Young. That's how they founded the Andrew J. Young Foundation, which he chairs. Okay, and he has been very active in the United States, Africa, and the Caribbean in promoting youth programs for education, health, leadership, and human rights. Now, he's a father of 3 daughters, 1 son, a grandfather of 9, and a great-grandfather of 1. And I'm sure that he's proud of all of those titles and all of those hats, the family ones in particular. So without further ado, Ambassador Young, please bring your remarks to us tonight. We look forward to it.
Well, thank you very much. Pleasure to be with you. Charge right in, because this is a time of real, but that's a time of change, where change is possible and where change is necessary, whether you like it or not. I don't know that ever before we've had 4 different pandemics, one on race, one on health, one on the economy, and one on climate. A new answers vision. And I don't care who ends up in the White House. I mean, the world is going to look different in the next few years. That this is an opportunity for all of you to spend thinking. One of the things about being quarantined is that with the help of iPad, I've been able to download all fresh myself on. And two things I'd like to recommend. One is, if you haven't read it in a long time, go off Bunch, American Life, by Brian Urquhart. University as a professor, and he gathered most of the intelligence on Africa between 1937 and 1939. And much of the strategy that ended up helping the Tuskegee Airmen in North Africa, for instance. The only that we had on Africa was gathered by Ralph Bunche between 1950 and he used that knowledge and experience to follow up the war by helping to create the United Nations and the decolonization of Africa. And I took Ralph Bunche as something of a role model, and not academically, unfortunately, but he came down to visit us in Selma, and marched with us across that same bridge that John Lewis and others marched across earlier. I got a sense of how his vision of the world was shaped by his life as an American scholar, but also as an American of who had been discriminated against. He used his own incentive. I mean, people at the United Nations, regardless of their racial background and color. And so the other person that I think we ought to read is right after the First World War. John Maynard Keynes wrote a little pamphlet called "The Economic Consequences of Peace," and I think it's still relevant because one of the things that's happening in this virus is that everybody's economy is going to be shot. And there's going to have to be another going back, getting the world together someplace to kind of rewrite the economic rules of trade and investment and development. And I think that now to bring new ideas to the table. Where we get those ideas is, I learned President Carter gave me a little note, not much bigger than this, when I was sworn in as ambassador to the United Nations, where he said, I want you to talk to as many African leaders as possible and ask them what they expect of this nation and how we might help them. The operative word there is ask. And normally from the state, your instructions are telling you what to tell people about America's position. It's what I respect. And he listened and he asked. And that was the reason why we were able to learn, for instance, that South Africa really wanted to find a way to get out of the trap that they were in. And they just needed help. And I went down to South Africa in 1970. He was playing tennis. I was sitting in the government box. And all of the Afrikaners was so curious. They were trying to figure out how we were getting along in the United States. They wanted to know about intermarriage. They had fears about blacks rising up and doing to them what they had been doing to us for years. But the fact that the United States government and business was willing to help in a transition made a peaceful transition possible. Now, somewhere in the world, things have changed to the point where some radical readjustments are going to have to be made. Right now, I'd imagine that all the think tanks around Washington and New York and the West Coast of what America's positions will be and how America plans to run the world. I always found that you could get more done listening. And usually, if you heard people out, you realize that we weren't that far apart and that we could accommodate the divisions and the diversity very easily and continued to follow that. I never had a single idea or issue that I brought to the United Nations vetoed by anybody because I worked with them to find a solution before. Now, that was based on years of listening that started for me at Howard University, really started at Dillard University. I learned to meet and greet and listen to students from other countries. And my foreign policy education was not from books, but from people. And it was through friendships and that I made that I got to understand basically what was going on in the world. And we have that opportunity. Well, the Atlanta University Center, Georgia State University, Georgia Tech, Emory, we probably have more than 200 countries represented in the student bodies of those institutions. And as you get to know people from as many countries as possible and get the years. And I think that the personal touch in diplomacy was another asset that I probably inherited from my parents because they were products of the American Missionary Association, historically Black colleges and universities. And my mother just didn't believe in students not having a place to go or whenever the dormitory shut down. And so when I travel around the world as a UN ambassador, almost I could run into people almost anywhere in the world that said, "Oh yeah, I went to your house for dinner, and your mother's gumbo, New Orleans," and I knew that that they had They treated me like I was a brother. And a lot of the success that I had in the world came out of nursing those relationships, and I try to maintain them today. I'm more or less outliving almost all of them. There are very few of us left, but the means of developing a consensus future of peace and prosperity on the planet, the methodology of resolving complex problems and issues, whether it be trade or investment. And I've found that the private sector can be as important and as helpful. In fact, more so, because in the development of the communities around which they are working. And I think more and more that's going to be true both ways. The economies of the world are going to be global. Now, that means that you also have to know something about that human rights, the political divisions and the historic divisions in just about any and every country are likely to flare up when times get hard. But that can be anticipated. And I would say that working together from wherever you are now, globalization is something that people fear, but probably everything that we're communicating on was made somewhere different in the world in which we live. And the possibilities and potential of the future are going to require global solutions. And global solutions depend on relationships. Relations out of a basic understanding of the fact that we are all created, that God created of one blood, all the nations of the world. And whether we like them or not, we're much more alike than we are different. And being sensitive to those differences while finding those things, peace and prosperity, now and in the world to come and the world that you will help to create. So thank you very much for your interest. Thanks for your energy, and don't let this harvest pass. This is a difficult time, but that's also a time of opportunity. God bless you.
Ambassador Young, thank you so very much. Can you hear the applause in the virtual universe? This has been absolutely wonderful. I'm looking at the chat. I'm looking at all the wonderful compliments that you have, and we want to thank you so very much. Ambassador said he would take a couple of questions. I'm scanning the chat. If you have any questions, please put them in now. We'll only have time for a couple of questions. So while we're getting started, let me ask you what you think the hot topics are in terms of the way that our students and young professionals can prepare themselves for work in foreign service, whether it's the public sector or the private sector. What are the hot topics that you think they should prepare to deal with on the global scale?
Well, I think I sort of listed them, and it depends on where you are and what your interests are. I would say that people who are teaching a year wherever they go in their change, the jobs that you choose is going to have to relate to the world in which we live. And if you're fluent in Spanish or Portuguese or whatever your background is, English will get you a lot of places, but you also have to master languages. That was one of my great uh, and to relate to people personally. And I would be very aggressive in my going up to people and speaking to them.
Mm-hmm.
Probably mostly at university. I remember my Nigerian across the hall grabbed me one day when I was too young to be there. He was a very mature student, and he said, "Hold up, wait a minute. If you ever get civilized, you would amount to something one day." And we remain friends. And I went back to Nigeria, and he had helped set up health service. He was the dean of the medical school at Ibadan, and was also one of the only neurosurgeons in Africa. But it was a formatory friendship where I disturbed his studies with my foolishness in college. But that was probably as valuable a friendship as I had, and I found that the key to Nigeria, I mean, the key to Africa is probably, in many respects, Nigerian, because there are going to be 1 billion Nigerians. Than they are citizens in the United States. Their population is growing. Now, the virus will have an impact on that, but it's not having too big an impact in Nigeria, I understand.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Let me just say about the Chinese, unless somebody asks the question that you want. My experience with China was they too wanted to be recognized and appreciated. And when they came to the United Nations, they had not been recognized and had never been there before. Started talking about food. And the Chinese foreign minister turned to my wife and said, "Where you find good Georgia food?" And she said, "Only at our house. When are you coming to dinner?" And we invited the whole delegation to dinner. And I said, "Well, the UN ambassador Waldorf, you're going to get Georgia food here." She said, "Don't worry. My mother's driving up, and she's going to bring some corn and greens and black-eyed peas from her garden." And she even and heated them up and fried some chicken and made some cornbread. And we served them mint juleps. And everybody ate everything, all the rib bones. But instead of going home, at 9:30 or 10 o'clock, as diplomats normally do, they became so relaxed. We were all sitting down on the floor in the living room, and every single member of that delegation had studied in the United States. And they knew so much more about the United States than we could possibly know about China. But they were willing to. Fine around the world is you can learn relationships. But the Iranian community here in Atlanta. So anybody that I hear is going home, when they come back, I call them up. How are things at home? What's going on? And this is the kind of personal intelligence gathering that staying in touch. I find that I'm preaching on the third Sunday at my church in Atlanta. YouTube, I think, Facebook, but I got a call from last time I got and another from England. And these were people that I had met through, that I called some of my friends in South Africa, and South Africans tend to come back and forth here quite a bit. Is in the hospital here in Atlanta, and so the former foreign minister is here, and global friendships are extremely valuable. And because I didn't have any formal education, I was a biologist because my daddy wanted me to be a dentist. But what I in the gym, on the campus, I mean, partying at Howard University was that was before ended. Mm-hmm.
Ambassador Young, we're going to draw this conversation to a close. I wish I could ask you more questions today, but perhaps you'll agree to come back and do one of our BPIA fireside chats so that so many of the people who are listening to you tonight will get a chance to hear you again and to hear your words of wisdom. There have been all kinds of compliments in the chat session. I hope you'll have a chance to see some of those. And but we're just going to have to bring you back if you agree to it, and hear more wisdom from you. Some of that kitchen diplomacy that you've been talking about. And
that time, in another 70 days, we will know who is running the world or trying.
Right. So everybody.
So it'll be good to come back after the election.
Okay.
In the meantime, everybody's got to vote, and everybody you know to vote.
All right, for sure. Everybody vote. Thank you so much, Ambassador Young. I can't, on behalf of BPIA and all of the members and all the attendees, we just thank you from the bottom of our hearts for sharing with us tonight.
Thank you both so much. We are going to go ahead and move into a small intermission while we prepare Ms. Lizer and Cal Williams for the next portion of the program on the main stage. So thank you, everyone.